You're listening to a workshop from the Reach Australia National Conference in 2026. This workshop is Serving, Building a Mobilising Church. We pray this resource is fruitful for you and for your ministry. If you do find it helpful, can you give $5 to help support the people and the network behind it? Your gift helps us to make more gospel-centred resources available at churches across the nation.
Now, this is the Serve workshop. I hope that's the one you think you're at. Just to give you a chance to change if that's not the case. Look, I'm stepping in for Chris Roulette, who was going to be just hosting. I'm Rhett Harris. Actually, 2008, I stepped into the Serve area to try and work out how it works at EV, and I think I was the only one in the country. And so we're trying to work out things from first principles. The wonderful thing is, over the years, now we've got a whole lot of people at churches wrestling with how to make the Serve area work. And so what I have the privilege of doing is essentially introducing you to a whole bunch of gun people in this space, working in different contexts, but working at how do we make Serve work. So that's really what I'm going to do. But we've got Ben here at Southside, Katy, Colonel Gardens, Emma's from Hunter Bible, and Emily's from Central Prezi, Ipswich. So, Scotty Curtis was going to be in the team, but he's just had to sub out and step over somewhere else. So, very flexible, but we're hoping to cover kind of an overview of the Serve area. I'm very biased. I think it's the most important area to get firing because it essentially enables, as you mobilise people, you can do all the other areas well. So I am biased, but it's absolutely critical to build capacity as you get this area going. But I'll hand over to these guys. How about I pray? Father, we thank you so much for the fact that you've called us into relationship with you, the living and true God. But we also thank you that you've called us up to be doing these works of service, this work of the Lord. And we ask, as we think in this space, that you help us do so well for the sake of your body and also for those who as yet don't yet know you. And give us a good and fruitful time together now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Rhett. Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Ben, as Rhett mentioned. It's great to be here. We do feel very privileged to be here. Rhett was saying he's the first guy that was doing this ages ago. Pretty much anything we present today is pretty much on the back of what Rhett has said before. So we're just taking what he has said and repackaging it. And if we miss anything, there's a book that Rhett's written on serving that you can actually access through the Reach Australia website, which is immensely helpful. We've tried to get a bunch of different people on our panel today from different sized churches to give you hopefully a picture of what that might look like. So Katy, can you give us a picture of who you are, what your role is at church, and even like a picture of what church looks like on a Sunday maybe?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Katy. I'm from Adelaide. We're a suburban church in the kind of about 20 minutes out of the city of Adelaide. We're about 170 people in average on a Sunday, fairly like intergenerational, so kids all the way up to seniors, fairly even spread of those. And my role at church is I oversee or lead our our kids and youth, so under 18s, and our Serve Others area, and parts of our membership area as well.
Yeah, that's helpful just in terms of the different hats you wear. Do you know roughly in your week how much time you'd give to the Serve one particularly?
Yes, because we spent a bit of time working this out a while ago. I think I'd probably give at least 2.5 to 3 days to serve others, but bearing in mind that some of kids and things comes into that as well. So there's a bit of crossover between those things.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Katy. Emma, hello. You're at Hunter. Should be on, I reckon.
Yes.
Yes, we're good.
No green light, so I was just feeling a bit worried there for a minute.
Yeah. Can you give us a bit of a picture? What do you do at HBC? And again, paint that picture for us of what Hunter looks like.
Yes, so I work in training and development. So my task is really to look after our higher level leaders and just think about how we're growing and supporting them. I've been there for a long time, so I think we're hitting the 25-year mark. We have 5 congregations over 3 locations, so it's quite a complex sort of network of people.
And how many people roughly would you get on a Sunday?
So I'd say we've got about 1,500 in our sort of as members, so that would be, that means for a Sunday. I'm not quite sure on that.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. The reason for it is it's just helpful to paint the different sizes. These principles we'll talk about sort of do apply across sizes, so it's helpful. And Emily, same questions. Tell us a bit about your role and your church.
Cool. So I'm at Central Presbyterian Church in Ipswich, and that's about 30 minutes west of Brizzy. We are a multi-site church, so we have 4 different locations, 3 services that run concurrently on a Sunday, and then a night service as well at one of our other locations. We're about 400 across a Sunday. So we've got one of our congregations, our 10 a.m. at Ipswich, is quite big, so that's a sort of 250 to 300. That's wrong maths. But it's about 250 people, and then we've got a couple of smaller congregations, so we have kind of that big church culture there, and we've got small church culture as well that we try and work with too.
Yeah, awesome. That's so helpful. I'm Ben. I'm one of the pastors at Southside. We have about 400 on a Sunday across 2 services, so similar to Emily, but much more simple in just 2 services. And I do our serve area as well as our mission area and our mag area and the other areas at church as well. So we pretty much squeeze it in where we can is how much time I give it. Just want to point out, so all the slides will be on, you can find them on your QR code. You can chase that up on the website as well. And we've also put a bunch of resources too on there as well. So if you go away and you think there's something that we talked about that you'd like to access, have a look at the resource page for that as well, which is available there. But when we're talking about serve, we do want to start, like with anything, thinking about vision and what we're trying to achieve when it comes to this area, particularly at church. One of the pictures that has been so helpful over the years in thinking about church is that picture of a lifeboat, right? That we want to think about us as a lifeboat, and we are trying to reach people who are desperately lost without Jesus. We talk about this all the time at Southside. I think people are sick of us talking about the lifeboat imagery because we do want that to capture what we're trying to do as a church. But when it comes to the serve area, what we want to see is we want to see people generously serving on that lifeboat. So that's kind of the thing that we're pursuing. We don't just want to see people doing us a favour when it comes to ministry or signing up because I asked them and I'm a little bit persuasive. We don't want that. We want people to be generously serving because they're desperate to see the lost saved. We want people to be generously serving because they want to be about God's glory. And we know that when people serve, it's good for them individually and it's good for the church. And so that's what we want to see. At Southside, we have a prayer, actually, that we want to see 70% of our congregation serving. So this is what we're working towards. But whenever you come to things like this, it is possible to think that the people up on stage have it all together and are absolutely nailing this. So I just want to invite you into 2 stories of failure from our church, the things that, because we love that, right? We all love hearing about how people suck. And so I invite you to that. A couple of stories that keep me up at night, and we all have these, I think, in ministry. Those moments when you think back in your ministry where that would wake you up in cold sweats if you thought about it too much. The first one was 10 years ago. So at Southside, we ran rosters right across our church. We had no teams at all. And one Sunday, it was in our music area, both our singers woke up sick. And we had one musician who was, a good musician, but not a very good singer, decide that she would go from playing the instrument to singing on stage during music, and it was the carols. It was carols time of year, and so we sung Joy to the World with someone who was possibly tone deaf at the same time that we had a singer in kids' church because she was rostered on. So these are the moments for me where I think I can still hear the song, I can still hear those carols. And maybe a reason why I hate carols, but I'm there, I can see that. And I just think about that moment as something that, as someone who oversaw this area, that sort of broke me a little bit. But that was 10 years ago, a while ago. But we did have one from this year. So we have one of our teams. I had to talk a team leader down out of being a team leader this year. And as I was talking to someone else on that team, I was asking him about, we've got to step them down, that they weren't doing the best job, that sort of stuff. And he said, the rosters actually, he was doing rosters, and even that he was struggling with. And that team, there's 6 people on that team. So he was struggling to schedule 6 people in that team. And this is kind of what keeps us up at night a little bit, recognising that there's some things that you think are so obvious. Now, it would be possible to look at those moments and think that those people doing those roles, that they are the failures. But of course, we know Ephesians 4, right? If you think about Ephesians 4, that God has given the church, the gifts to the church are the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers, and they're given to the church to equip the people for works of service for the sake of building up the church. And so if you think about that, our role is to build up the church for the sake of the church. And so when you think about moments like that in my church, who's the problem? It's not our team that was struggling. It's not the musicians, and they were faithful and godly and willing to step into places maybe they didn't want to. The problem is actually me. So I think when we're thinking about the vision of our church, that we want to see people generously serving for the sake of the lost, for the good of themselves and the good of the church, we actually have to come to terms with that. So you're here today, so in some sense you get that you're here because you want to help equip your church for works of ministry, which is great. And so we want to face that first and foremost. It's up to us to help our church, but how do we build our church? What do we do with that? Well, that's what we're going to spend our time thinking about today, and it starts with something quite important, Katie. So I'm going to throw to you here.
Something quite important.
What is that? Where would we start?
Where do we start? What is a team? Yeah, all right. I'm going to stand up if that's okay, just because I need notes and I talk with my hands too much to leave them sitting on my lap. So just bear with me for a sec if that's okay. All right, yeah, as Ben said, there's a really beautiful biblical vision there for serving in our churches that I think all of us would love to see people doing, love people to see people joining in with us. And we're here today, and hopefully you guys are here today, because we think that the best way as churches that we can do that is by setting up a teams-based approach to ministry. So rather than the more traditional, like roster-based system that lots of us are used to, so for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk briefly about what makes up a ministry team. So what are some of the markers that we're looking for in a ministry team? And I'm going to also share just briefly some of the key things that we did at Trinity Church Colonel Light Gardens as we made this move from rosters to teams. So if you've not thought much about a team, which is totally fine, great that you're here, one way to describe a ministry team is that it's a group of people who work together and take responsibility for an outcome under God. You can have teams in just about every area of your church. Wherever you have people serving, I think there's an opportunity to help people and equip people to serve as part of a team. Now, I would imagine as many of us are used to that feeling of filling a roster each Sunday. Ben said this a little bit, getting people to sign up, people say yes or no. And then we see them come and they do their role joyfully on a Sunday, but they have no real reason to think about it much after that. They kind of leave and they've done their job. I think what teams help us do is shift this thinking a bit and give people the opportunity to really and meaningfully invest in a ministry area in a way that's valuable. When we move from just filling rosters to building ministry teams, I think we're no longer just organising tasks, but we're mobilising the body of Christ. And healthy teams will encourage and equip people to grow and keep growing in the ways that they serve, as well as creating space for people to learn from others and to grow in confidence and maturity as disciples. So here's 5 things that I think are great to look out for if you're setting up or you've already got ministry teams. 1 is, do those teams have a shared vision and purpose? So in teams, I think it's really important that everyone understands what it is that they're doing, why they're doing it, and that they're united around a common mission. The second key thing, I think, is shared ownership. So teams need to have ownership where people feel trusted, where they feel valued, where they know that they carry some kind of responsibility rather than just leaving it to other people. And all team members in that team take responsibility for making that ministry happen. The third thing is layers of leadership. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but I think as we build teams in our church, we also get the chance to build leaders, which is great for like sustainability and stuff in our ministries. The fourth one is teams are relational. So ministry teams create continuity of purpose and relationship. And instead of serving alongside different people each week, people get to build trust and connection and a shared sense of mission together. And then the last, but certainly not least important, is that our teams should be discipleship and word-based. So ministry teams are more than just functional groups. but they're places where people are spiritually encouraged, where they're grounded in God's word, and they're helped to grow as disciples. So, with a bit of a picture of what teams can look like, bearing in mind our teams are not like this all the time, they're not perfect by any means. About 8 years ago at Trinity Church, Colonel Gardens, we made this change from rosters to teams. And this definitely was not a small change for us. Before teams, we had this highly efficient process where people just clicked a button. They got an email and they clicked yes or no every week to let us know if they could help out. We didn't ask them why, they could or couldn't, they just said yes or no. And one of the problems with this was that it took someone in our team over 2 days to kind of manage putting this puzzle together. And one of the things that we learnt here about 8 years ago at Reach Australia conference is that our very highly efficient system didn't really give people the chance to grow in service or grow in maturity as part of the way they served. So we decided to make the switch, and it was a pretty big change for us. One of the first challenges that we identified was helping people see why the change was necessary. Why we wanted our serving to be more than just efficient, and why there was a whole lot they were missing out on if we didn't change something, if we didn't take responsibility for this and change something. So in October 2018, we sent out invites to every person in our church to come to a vision dinner. At that point, we were a church of about 300 people. We've planted a church since then and sent off a bunch. So we hosted these dinners and tried to get like 150 adults to come to these dinners. We strongly encouraged everyone in our church to come. In fact, I think we used quite a lot of relational capital to get everyone there so that we could tell them about our plans for next year, so we could tell them about this change that we were making and how they could be a part of it. And at these dinners, we spent a lot of time talking about the why, helping our church people, our church family, to catch the why of ministry teams, why they were good for them, and why they were good for mission in our church. I think overall we had pretty good buy-in for these. Most of our church came to one. Most of them embraced the change. And even those that didn't, they still went away with a good understanding of what we were trying to do. About that same time, we created a vision document as well. It was a document that had why we thought this was important, the steps we were going to take, and we gave that to everyone in our church as well so they could take it home and read it. So they were our vision dinners. The second thing we did was we sat as a staff team and we did what we called a ministry assessment. We couldn't come up with a better name for it, but that was what it was. And we looked at all the ministries that we had across church and the people who were involved in those ministries. And we worked out whether any of them already had the characteristics that we hoped to see in teams. And then we worked out where the gaps were in our teams, where they were going to be, and who we thought in our church family could start leading teams. This took us several days. It was quite the kind of whiteboarding experience. And between our staff team, there was a fair bit of back and forth about who wanted what for what ministry, where we were going to have kids leaders, who was going to lead welcoming teams. There was no argy-bargy as such, but there was definitely some kind of moments of having to work things out. But we got there in the end, and we made a bit of a plan. And then the next thing that we did was we wrote some role descriptions. We wrote a role description for a team leader, and we wrote a role description for a team member. Because we wanted to give people something really practical that said, here's what we're asking you to do. Here's what being part of a team looks like practically, and here's what leading a team looks like practically. There are about 5 things that we noted on there. Things like loving your team through resourcing, loving your team through communicating, very kind of practical things. And that was a helpful step because then in December, I think we started what we called our summer of catch-ups, so one-to-one catch-ups. And this again was a fairly time-consuming process. We sat down with many of the people in our church family one-on-one to talk about what team's ministry was going to look like and to talk about leading or being part of a team. So while this was time-consuming, I think it was super helpful as people asked us clarifying questions, people considered what the role could look like, And many of our first round of team leaders came out of those catch-ups. So then, I think about 6 months later, after almost 6 months of quite intensive planning, we rolled out our first teams in February that year. And we rolled them out in a staged approach. So we didn't do them all at once. We didn't just flick a switch and say we're now all teams. But we started with kids ministry first because we felt like they were the closest to having a team culture already. So they were used to working together. They already shared responsibility. They already communicated well with each other. And then throughout that year, slowly, all of our ministry areas became teams. I think the last one we did in about September or October was our magnification teams, our bands and up front roles, which was close towards the end of the year. I think as we tracked through that year, we saw some great ministry wins in our teams. One of the teams that I think stood out to us was our set-up and pack-up teams. In Adelaide, we meet in an RSL hall, which is a little bit different to the RSLs here, just bearing in mind it's really just an empty hall with a bar. But there is quite a lot of set-up and pack-up that we need to do to make those spaces kid-friendly. And we used to ask people to come along and help us with that, to move, tables out of the bar, to put kids' stuff in there. And they did it really joyfully. But I think every morning when they came, we were dependent on our senior pastor who knew what went where, what had to be moved, where things were stored. And he would tell people, give them instructions, and they would follow them. But when we helped that team, or that group of people form a team, they started to work out some of those things together. So they worked out how to get set up and pack up done much more efficiently. And they started asking us questions like, would it be better if we stored that thing over there because it's easier to access? Or, couldn't we put that there so that when kids arrive, it's easier to find? Which we just thought was great. And now I think as a staff team, we are probably the least helpful people in this ministry area because I don't think I actually know where anything goes anymore. But our teams just kind of owned it and have it. So there were lots of those kind of ministry wins. We saw friendships being developed throughout those, forming of teams. We saw people loved and cared for as part of forming those teams. But while there were lots of wins, we also had what affectionately became known to us as roof leak moments. So there were still moments where not everything went smoothly, especially in that first year. We had gaps in teams for quite some time. We had people forgetting that their team was on because we didn't send them a reminder. And there were things that were just kind of messy at various times. So to help our church family through this, another thing that we did was we did serve Sundays. We still do them now, but we just don't do them as often, where we took time in our service to highlight both the joys and the wins of how those teams were going. So we wanted people to be encouraged that, yes, this is going well, but we also wanted them to know that, actually, where it's been messy, everyone is feeling a little bit of that, I'm not on my own. I remember saying from the front quite a few times, I know we're here and we're trying to get over here, but before we can get from this place to this place, there's this massive swamp in the middle, and we just kind of have to wade through it together. And I think that was just kind of language that helped people to realise, we're all doing this together. And we did, we stuck with it. The last major thing that we did was at the end of the year where we introduced all-in training and team meetings in all of our teams. So we gathered people together to talk about and review their ministry and to equip them to do their roles. And we talked about what was going well, what wasn't going well. We gave them skills for different things. We did a combination of team member training, what does it look like to love your team well? But we also did some skills-based training for coffee and kids ministry and things like that. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've grown that culture of meeting together and training each other. There are lots of things that we are still working on. And one of the things that I've learnt about teams as we've done this is that they are always changing. So they're never set and forget, but every time a team leader changes or a team member changes, those teams look different and need different levels of investment. I think we've been really thankful for the way that the culture of teams has shaped the way we serve together. We also set a goal of how many people we wanted serving in our teams, And we were able to meet that goal as part of kind of growing in our team's culture, which was a real kind of praise and celebration point for us to be able to do that. And 4 years ago, we planted a church and sent off about 160 of our people. And while we didn't kind of see the fruit of that, the planting team from that church said to us several times that when we've got teams in place, it's a little bit like planting on cheat mode. This idea that kind of lots of things just happen already as a planting team because people are already on board and doing those things. So that's a little bit of our story, just kind of tracks you through. I'm happy to answer questions. I know it's a bit of a scattergun of things without a lot of detail, but I'm going to hand over to these guys for some more practical things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, very helpful, Katie. So we'll do Q&A at the end. So if you've got questions for Katie, write them down, and at the end of our time, we will have an opportunity. You can ask Katie anything specifically. I think it's such a helpful thing to think through the difference between rosters and teams, particularly. Rosters, we're asking people to do a task, but teams do so much more than that. Your ideas there were awesome, Katie. I loved hearing that. We're going to give you just a couple of moments of reflection now, whether it's if you've come by yourself, then it can be personal. If you've got someone you came with, you can have a chat to them. Just a couple of minutes to have these questions, to have a look at these questions. So does your church function more like rosters or more like teams? And how bought in are people to their roles? So we're going to give you a couple of minutes for this. So don't linger on that first question. Have a think about it, have a chat if you've got it, and we'll rally the troops in a second. Go. All right. We're going to continue. Some of the things Katie brought up then we'll flesh out and talk about, and hopefully you'll see we're going to sort of look at where you would start and where you'd go within teams. Katie mentioned there's something about role descriptions, so we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of clarity when it comes to a team. You've probably heard it before, clarity is king when it comes to helping people serve. And one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to clarity is spending time up front to bring clarity, which will save time later. So if you shortcut clarity up front when you're onboarding people, you will either find that you have to pay for that or the team will pay for that, and at some point later you'll have to deal with that. So kind of think about it when it comes to clarity. Do yourself a favour and spend the time up front with clarity. I know the temptation in ministry, when life is busy, you get a spot that you need to fill, you get a person that can fill it, and you want to shortcut that and just get them into it. But clarity is king. So one of the ways that you can go about clarity is through role descriptions. So Katie mentioned there, they did this at Trinity. This is something at Southside that we have done as well. And we've put our role descriptions actually in the handout. So if you go through the QR code and have a look at the handout, you'll find our role descriptions from Southside there. We've given you all of our role descriptions as a Canva template. So if you want to take them and use them and change them, you're most welcome to do that. But I do need to say some things about role descriptions because it's tempting to think that this is going to solve all of your problems, and it won't. So 4 warnings when it comes to role descriptions. Number 1, it's not a silver bullet. So yesterday heard he mentioned at the Foundations 1, we're a silver bullet culture. We love silver bullets. Role descriptions are not silver bullets. So if you operate with rosters and you want to move to teams and you think this is the silver bullet that's going to do it, it won't. And if you have a roster and you give them a role description, it probably is still going to act as a roster if you don't actually help them through that. So that's the first warning, it's not a silver bullet. Number 2, role descriptions can't replace conversations. They can't replace conversations. So if you just think that you've got a team leader or a team member and you hand them a role description and say, get on with it, there will be problems that come with that. Number 3, role descriptions are a starting point. So they're not the end goal. They're just a starting point to ongoing conversations as people figure out what ministry actually is. And number 4, this won't solve everything in your church. And I do just want to highlight this, that I think it would be possible to look at our role descriptions and think, wow, this church has it all together. If you read the role descriptions, you'll see almost in every single one there's a spelling mistake, which is true. And it's just not. They're working documents for us as a church that are always constantly changing. So just want to highlight that. But there's 4 reasons why I think role descriptions are really helpful. And here they are. Number 1, role descriptions help you put the why before the what. So I think in ministry, we're tempted to get people to do the task, and some ministries are more obvious than others. So I think in our church, we found like things like cleaning and the yard, they're always going to drift towards the task, but role descriptions help you put the why before the what. So the why is we're not just cleaning the building, we're desperate to see the lost saved and disciples matured, and a building helps us do that. That's the why before the what. Number 2, it helps us keep the culture over the task. So the culture in a team is more important than the task. You know, there's that line, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If people know what they're doing but the culture in the team's bad, then you've got to fix that. Role descriptions can help with that. Number 3, role descriptions help team leaders buy in. So the way that we use them at our church, we get our leaders to onboard people with role descriptions, and so it's a way of reminding them what they're doing, and they can buy into that. Our guys can also change the role descriptions, and we invite them to do that. And number 4, and I think this is by far the biggest one for me, is so for me, right, I am a vibe person. I'm vibey as, hence the spelling mistakes in everything I do. But one of the things that I learnt was that my conversations to onboard people weren't always the same. So some teams I was like nailing those onboarding conversations, and in other teams it was a disaster. And I was just vibing my way into those conversations. Now, I could kind of get into the right space that you want to get into, but I learnt that I needed something to guide me through those conversations. I'm also time poor when it comes to serving. So for me, if I want to onboard someone, ideally, I don't have to do any prep. I can print off a role description. I can sit down and work through it. And with our role descriptions, that gets me 95% of where I want to go. So they're kind of a way to help me and my weaknesses to actually be a little bit better in what I'm trying to do. So they help time poor leaders like me to do this. But again, if you hear how good role descriptions are, make sure you remember the warnings. And actually, not every church does role descriptions. In fact, Emma, you're about to tell us why role descriptions are not good.
I do feel like I'm going to be the devil's advocate here.
Please do.
We put our staff that work in the serve area put no resources into role descriptions. So
tell us about
I
that.
know.
Why?
We do have role descriptions, but they all happen within our other teams. I think what we are more focused on is getting role clarity for people, and we would see that role descriptions are one way of doing that. So we really want people to be able to understand what their jobs are, but I think we would also hold that how people see their jobs is also a function of them as individuals. So some people really love things to be very neat and tidy. So they would get that role description and they would be like, this is my dream. You tell me exactly what to do, where to be. Whereas people at the other end of the spectrum, and maybe this is your vibey nature, you might sit more with this, they actually don't need a role description to do a great job. They are just very able to be fluid in their roles. So I think in that way, we're thinking about the individual and how they might approach it. I think the other thing for us as well is what we centralise and what we sort of diffuse down to the teams. So a lot of our work in the serve space happens in the teams rather than directed from a centralised position.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, that felt like a very long
very helpful.
diatribe on role descriptions.
Katie or Emily, do you want to add to that or enter into?
I just feel like, so we used to have role descriptions really lovely and perfect when we were a smaller church. And then when we grew to multi-site, we realised that each location has its own uniqueness. And so the role descriptions can change depending on which location you're at. So then if you multiply that out by 4, suddenly your admin just like explodes. So we moved to something that was a little bit more generic. So we tried to work out how generic can we be? It's kind of like the team leader, team member role description. We have a generic team leader role description just to kind of instill some of that culture stuff and try and get that right first, rather than going down to, you must remove the bins from outside the church at this point in time, and because that's going to change. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's helpful. Katie, you want to add anything?
Perhaps just one thing, we are a much smaller church, so I think scalability means that we can have these roles. I also really like clarity, so it works well for me to write them the first time. But what we found over time is that actually our team leaders and area leaders have been the ones who have kind of evolved those role descriptions to kind of make them work for their team, for their ministry as it's changed. And we've kind of, as much as I don't always love to let things go, that's been a real kind of win, I think, for them to take that on.
Yeah, that's good. So if you hear us, what we're saying is clarity is king. You've got to give people clarity. If you shortcut clarity, you'll pay for it later. Role descriptions are one way and the right way to bring... No, I'm joking. Role descriptions are one way to...
Are you offering us some free hours of your time to come and fix up our role descriptions, Ben?
I am in no way qualified to do anything in HBC. You guys are much better at this than me. But clarity is the aim. Now, can you guys at the back still hear us with the rain? I'm good. All right, you guys need to speak up. Okay. Emily, you got this. So one of the things with teams is bring clarity. But of course, what you're doing is not just bring clarity to a team, you need to bring people onto your team.
You do. You need people for the teams.
That's right. So we're going to talk about recruitment and some blockers. Emily, you...
Absolutely. So I don't know if this story sounds familiar to you. Maybe it's Sunday during the announcement time. Someone has a clipboard and they say, we need people to come and help with kids' church. Come see me after if you're interested. The service finishes and you're left alone in the foyer with a clipboard. So you wait till the next Sunday, and the next Sunday you stand up the front and say, oh guys, remember, we need people to sign up for kids' church. I've got the clipboard here. I'll see you in the foyer afterwards. And so you wait in the foyer for another Sunday alone. Meanwhile, your team is just dwindling. So the third Sunday comes around, and you get an announcement from the front that is, guys, we need someone for kids' church or no one's going to look after your kids next week. And somehow this invitation to serve turns into some sort of guilt trip that's put on the parents for having the kids because it's their responsibility. And we've just destroyed that entire moment. Maybe that's not what you experience, but maybe it's not that bad. Maybe you're always the one asking and you feel like you have to apologise to people to get someone to step into serving. Maybe you always just have a yes person. Maybe you have one of those yes people. We love yes people, but maybe they're your easy win and you go to them. But how do we actually get people serving with delight and for the glory of God? So it's something that they really want to be doing. I've got 4 things to kind of help us think through this a little bit better. These are 4 blockers to recruitment, and I think they're fairly common. I reckon I've seen all of these play out at our church, and certainly sometimes they still do. So first thing I would love for you guys to consider, what is your invitation like when you invite people into serving? What is your messaging like? People sometimes need to be shown how their ministry area contributes to the kingdom. So instead of saying we need people for kids' church, how about would you like to be part of growing our youngest disciples? That invites them into something much bigger than just a task. Vision is a really great place, great place to start with teams ministry. And if you can think of an area that links really easily with some biblical principles, if you don't have teams with vision statements yet, it's really good to start to get those in place so that you can have some of that language to invite people into serving with real kingdom motives. Maybe it's welcoming, maybe it's extending the welcome that Christ first gave to us. And it's really, it's just about showing people that their serving has gospel impact. Why not do a vision casting session with your teams? We have done them before heaps. We get our church's vision up on the board for people, and then we try and pull out all the passages in the Bible that relate to that area of ministry, and we try and craft something that is both biblically rich, but also reflects something of the bigger vision of our church, so kind of ties in really nicely to that as well. So that's vision. The second blocker is that the role might be too complex. I wonder when you are trying to find that kids ministry leader, are we looking for someone who can write the curriculum, run the game. They have to do the crafts and come prepared, and they have to also lead a small group. Now, if you are looking for that person is the kids ministry superstar, and they're amazing people if you have them. But a lot of the time, we don't have these superstars in our congregations, but we might have someone that could do one of those jobs or two of those jobs. So is there a way that you can break down that role and invite someone into that first step of serving? And maybe there's a discipleship opportunity there too. So maybe there's a discipleship opportunity to disciple them from the simple to the more complex role in the future. Blocker number 3 is that often we can be reactive in our recruitment rather than proactive. And you might be one of those people who feels like you're always just scrambling to get teams filled. I wonder, have you thought about what the team needs to look like for in 6 months' time? And we know we want to be relying on God for that, and we can't see into the future. But maybe can you anticipate some of the needs? Do you have a lot of grade 12s that are graduating from youth, and do they need a home group that is ready to receive them next year? Are you thinking about leaders that you can be training to be ready to receive them when they graduate and become young adults? When we're reactive, often we can rush into decision making without considering who we're actually asking. And I often talk to my team leaders and I say, onboarding is a really fun, positive kind of thing, and everyone loves an onboard conversation. It's quite happy. Disembarking someone because you've made a poor and rushed decision is often very messy and painful. And if you can make some steps early so that you don't have to have as many of those conversations, then that's a really good thing. So think about proactive recruitment. What can you be doing now for the teams that you need in 6 months' time? The other thing too is that the talent pool is artificially small. Now, I will jump into the next slide for this one. Oh, okay. Often when we think about the people that we could have in our teams, we're really, really good at using our brains, so our own brains. And you know what? Our own brains, they're limited. They only think of a certain amount of people. The other thing we can do is start to use our team's brains. We could ask our team, have you guys thought of people that you want to recruit to this team? And it's awesome if your team members are the ones that are waving the flag for that team as well, because they're going to bring the energy. They're going to want to get people on the team serving as well. The new people pathway is a really good way of getting people into teams. I don't know what your pathway looks like, but for us, after they've done a newcomers course, there's an opportunity to invite them into home groups, so some sort of a discipleship, so they're growing in their faith, and also to have a serve chat. So come and have a serve chat and then get placed in a team. So that's another good way of getting people into teams. One-off events can be really helpful to kind of test run people and see how they go. You might have something really big that happens at Christmas, and you might say to someone, hey, can you look after the barbecue? Maybe they're really, really good at doing that. Maybe they're someone who would make a really good hospitality team member or team leader. Maybe they run something really well for you. Church comms, sometimes useful. Church comms is like email and stuff like that, and broad promotion. Both of them I would probably tend to do less of. Broad promotion in particular, that's your up the front announcement with a clipboard and being lonely in the foyer. Not always the best recruitment strategy. We often go, oh, you know what, if I need something to get done, I'll get the minister to just announce it from the front and all our problems will be solved. It seldom happens because I think you just kind of throw this thing out to a really wide audience, and by the time everything else has happened, I think everyone kind of forgets what you've spoken about and they don't kind of follow up. Relationally is probably the way that these things happen. Broad promotion can be useful if you need a really specific role filled. For example, if you need a bus driver with a bus license, people go, oh, I have one of them, that's a really easy thing for me to come and go, hey, I've got this thing that says I can do this thing, so I'll come and talk to you about that. So that's where broad promotion can be helpful when you're trying to find essentially a needle in a haystack. Yeah.
No, that's very helpful, Emily. The assumption, though, here, when we're thinking about blockers to recruitment, is that we are clear on what our recruitment pathway is. And it's interesting and important that you think about this reality. So the truth is here, whatever church you're from, you have a pathway into church. So it's not, the question is not, do you have one? You do have one. It's just trying to figure out what that is. So Emily mentioned before, it might be the way that people come into church. Someone stands at the front and says, join us. There is a helpful way to think about the different models that you might have for recruitment. So pretty much the three different models are a centralised recruitment, a hybrid recruitment, and an open market recruitment. So the centralised recruitment is where basically the office controls that, so it's centralised, completely centralised. The free market is where you might say to your team leaders or your team members, hey, if you find someone, you can get them to join your team, and it's basically a free-for-all. And the hybrid model is somewhere in between those two. So it might be, you can find some people, but let's chat before you onboard them, or some version of that. Those are kind of three broad systems that you can have in terms of a recruitment process, and we all have them. We all have a process. So potentially it might be your admin lady is the process, and she sorts that out, and that's a version of centralised. But Emily, can you sell us the dream of why centralised might be a good model?
Yeah, I can do that. That's what I'll do for you. So at Central Church, when people want to be involved in formal serving, we get them to have what we call a serve chat. It's really just a conversation that helps people find the ministry area that they're going to most effectively serve in and most joyfully serve in. It helps us take a bit of a holistic approach, just thinking through someone's character, their spiritual gifts, their skills, their passion, experience, and so we can place them in ways that are good for them and good for the church as well. Importantly, our serve chats are not a one-off conversation. It's part of an ongoing and open conversation. As circumstances change, life circumstances, new challenges, opportunities, they want to do something new, another serve chat can help support them, encourage them, make sure they have what they need to care for them really well and to care for the teams that they serve in too. They might have part of that initial conversation with their team leader if they're serving in a team, but they might get referred on to us as well. Our serve chats do look different depending on what community you're in, because what we have is kind of a scaled, centralised process. So yes, it's centralised. It comes through the office. What's that? I don't know. But it comes through the staff and the team of serve people. So I have a team. I have a representative at each location. Sometimes there's two of them at the location, and they'll be the ones running the serve chats. So there's lots of people to do lots of serve chats, which is really good. I remember training in serve chats and thinking, wow, this is like 90% pastoral conversation, about 10% actually serving. But I think if we think that serving and discipleship sit quite closely side by side together, I think that checks out to be a really positive thing. So the pros, there's a few, so strap in. You just get a really good idea of someone and what their gifts are. It gives us an opportunity to identify any pastoral concerns that there might be that might mean that there are certain roles that aren't appropriate for them in this season of life, or maybe they just need some extra support. If people are new, we can actually get some feedback on our integration processes by asking them how they've settled in, so that can be a good touch point. People's life stories also just give us an insight into their lives and then help us go, oh, have you thought about doing something like this? And it might be something that they haven't actually thought about themselves yet. It might be walking with someone through something really hard that they have experienced, and they're willing to walk with someone else through that. We can ask them how their journey with Jesus is going, how they're investing in their own growth and discipleship, because we want to make sure that our people serving are investing in themselves as well. It means that team leaders will receive someone into their teams knowing that they've completed this first step. And so it gives them confidence to lead them well too. And then I can hand over any relevant info that might help them lead those people better. It's a layer of protection for my team leaders as well. We had a lady who came to our church and she was really, really keen on joining the music team. She wasn't really interested in joining a home group. She didn't want to do any one-to-one Bible reading. She didn't want to do our newcomers course. She said that she felt that music would be the best place for her, and that would be like her home group as well. That would fill all her needs. We did find out that she'd served at a church not too far away, and we were able to kind of contact the minister, and he said, yes, we did have her in our music team, and she was quite opinionated and drove a lot of people quite mad. Sometimes you can work with those people, but you need to work out what your team leader's capacity is and what the teams are. So there is sort of that layer of protection. And I suppose there is a con in this. I will admit that there are some cons. It does mean that you will probably have more hard conversations, and you kind of need to know whether you are prepared to have some of those hard conversations in that time, and whether is that going to be too taxing for you. And yes, it can be time consuming. Sometimes it's a slow process of getting someone to serve. I don't know, I kind of like going a little bit slow. I'm a bit risk averse, and I think it's helpful for people to spend some time getting to know the people that they're going to serve before they jump into a role. So there you go.
That's beautiful, Emily.
Thanks.
Appreciate you selling the dream. Now, I'm going to tell you why Emily's wrong. So, we do the hybrid model at Southside. What the principle here is, though, to backtrack a little bit, is that you do need to figure out what's going to work in your context. So when we were rosters, we were essentially a free market where the admin would solve all the problems, and then within the people she knew, they just solve all the problems. When we moved to teams, we moved to very strict centralised. We need to, rein it in here. But now we work in a hybrid model. And the reason we do that is, so basically the way it works is, I say to my team leaders, between us, we need to solve the problem of your team as you realise there's a problem of not enough people in your team. Between us, we need to figure that out. If you find people, come and chat to me. If I find people, I'll come and chat to you. And our team leaders are having the onboarding conversations. Let me give you some pros to the hybrid model. Number one, Emily is right, that time for centralised is a lot. So as church gets bigger, there is a reality that the more people you're onboarding, if you're having pastoral conversations with every single new person, it does add up. That is a lot. That's just a reality for that. So hybrid does help with that. As church gets bigger, we've noticed that, we've noticed that connection's really important, and naturally it doesn't happen as quickly. So if we think about the principle Katie sort of mentioned before, that discipleship happens in teams, I think typically everyone has a process of getting people into growth groups, but we should be chasing as quickly as we can to get people into teams because we want them to grow as disciples of Jesus. So that's important. And the connection aspect, so we moved to 2 services recently, but we would often have services of 350 before moving to 2, and people just struggled for connection. So if I can get them in a team as quickly as possible, they can find that connection. 3, I like to move quicker than slower. I think that is a good thing. I think sometimes serving helps people own their ministry and get connected into church. And the quicker we can do that, the better. There are some ministries that obviously can't do that. So music's one of them, kids is one of them, youth is one of them. You've got to be careful of those particularly. There is sometimes natural inbuilt slowness to those systems. I know for us we have child-safe processes and all that sort of stuff that does slow that down. But of course you've got to recognise that, but I'm keen to move quicker than slower. 4, I don't think every ministry needs a pastoral conversation to get people on board with it. So if I get a new guy at church and he's keen to join the yard team, that is a good thing, and a pastoral conversation might get not much out of that guy that wants to join the yard team anyway. But if he serves with other men, particularly we have men on our yard team, that would be good for him. So I don't think every ministry needs it. Number 5, I think it's great when team leaders own their onboarding. So I think that's a good thing, and this model does help that. And number 6, with role descriptions. So you can see the clarity with role descriptions, then our team leaders can crystallise what they're trying to do as they're onboarding their team members into their team. Now, there are some cons to this. Number 1, the first con is it kind of works a little bit too well. So you've got to be aware of that. That's a joke. The truth is there is some cons. So you're taking a risk. That's a reality. So if you don't like taking risks, you are taking a risk when it comes to this. And number 2, I think a big con is if you have a bad team and you're quickly adding people into that bad team, then they will struggle and the team will struggle. So there's a reality to that if you move quickly on that. Now, I'm sure there's other cons as well. Katie, can we quickly talk to you? So tell us about what model you do and why you do that.
Yeah, sure. I'm on Team Emily on this one, just going to say. We are fairly centralised as well, particularly at 2 key points. Like, we are very centralised when people join us and first join a team, I think for some of those reasons that Em talked about. The other place where we're highly centralised is when people take a step up in ministry, so they move from the set-up team into a teaching role or something like that. That usually warrants a conversation with a member of the serve team or a staff member. But we are a little bit more flexible when someone who's already in a kids team, for example, if the MAG leader says, can you read the Bible once a week? We're going to say, oh yeah, just go for it, that's fine. Like, so it's kind of, we've got 2 key points where we're pretty centralised and a very small amount of, hybrid kind of model.
Yeah, good. Do you want to add anything, Emma?
Just to say that we're on Team Ben, so we do run a hybrid model. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So the key thing is, whichever model you do have a model, that's the key thing. You do have a model. Your model needs to shift as your church grows and changes. I think that's important to recognise. What works for you now might not work for you in 100 people time, and you've got to be thinking about that critically. And what worked for you previously might also not work in the future, so you've got to recognise that. Now,
are you just saying you want to move to centralised in the future, or...?
If you come to work at Southside, you can do whatever you want. Now, let's have an opportunity to just reflect for a moment. Discussion. So how would you rate your current recruitment strategy in church out of 4? So number 1, it sucks at the moment. Number 2, it's okay but needs a lot of work. Number 3, solid but needs improving. Number 4, firing. Number 2, what was one idea you liked and could explore more later? We're going to give you a few minutes to chat about this. We know we've been talking. Chat about this or reflect on this to the person next to you. We'll come back in a moment. All right.
I have to get Ben to do the prompt because my voice is a bit on the softer side. So I'm going to be about to break all the rules of workshop presentation because instead of some activity at this point to get you working and chatting, there is a bit more content. So as it's 5:15 on the first day, just feel free to let this content wash over you and just take what you want from it. If you still are concentrating at this point, all hats off to you guys. So I'm going to be talking about leadership development, and I'll be giving you 8 points on leadership development. But just to start us off, I just wanted to talk about 2 key ideas that we're thinking about when we're thinking about what leadership development is. So there's sort of 2 ideas that get sort of melded together when we're thinking about developing leaders. So one is the idea that we want to develop enough leaders to do the job of leading. So really we're thinking about how we're building leadership capacity in our church, our organisation, so that we can navigate leader turnover, growth, change, unexpected circumstances, so that we can do the identifying, equipping and deploying. And then the other idea is the idea that we're equipping individual leaders, like we're actually developing the individual leaders. We're helping them develop knowledge, skills and abilities that they need to do the job. and we're thinking about what future development might look like for these leaders. So the first one, when we're thinking about organisational leader capacity, sorry to use that word, church leader capacity, when I'm thinking about that, I've really learnt that because at the moment for us, we are thinking like into the long term. If we don't do something now for the big group of leaders that we're looking after, in 2 or 3 years' time, we're going to have a big gap in the leaders that we have available to draw on to lead our people and to love them. So this is what keeps me up at night. It's not carols, I don't know, Joy to the World, or it's the thought that we are not going to have enough leaders in our system to actually love the people in our church well, and that I could have been doing some things now that would have supported that. I think the other thing that I draw on when I'm thinking about this is my early experiences in ministry. So when we first went to Newcastle, really there was a very small group of people that we were working with. And so one of my first tasks was to cold call through a list of people. Who here has cold called through a list of 30 people? It's a marvellous job, is it not? No? So I think what I learnt from that was every phone call is an opportunity to develop or think about what's going to happen next for the person that I'm calling. They might not be a Christian and I'm going to be having that conversation with them about their eternity. They might be someone looking to hook in with church and I'm going to be helping them think about their next step. Or they might be the person that we're going to send out from our church into full-time ministry somewhere else. So every person is an opportunity to think, where can we take and develop them? I also want to add another C word to our list of something is king. In leadership development, what do you guys think is that other C that we might say is king? Christ. Oh, there's a lot of C's, isn't there? Character. Character is king. So when we're thinking about leadership development in the Christian context, the foundational piece of that is character and then conviction. So I think that came up in the plenary discussion as well. We don't want people in leadership positions in our churches that's not resting on that foundation of character. And I think we're also trying to build this conviction piece that leadership is service. So we're not looking for leaders who love to lead, I guess. We're looking for people who love to serve. And when we're thinking about developing leaders, we're also thinking about doing what is good for the whole person. So I think we would all feel the pressure to fill a gap in our teams, on our rosters, whatever we're thinking about. When we're thinking about developing leaders, we're thinking about what is good for them, what we've got to take into consideration their capacity, their season of life, where they're at. So, got my old school paper out the front. The first thing is culture is the soil. So, in the plenary as well, we're thinking about culture. Culture is our most powerful tool in thinking about how we're going to develop leaders. So you'll have a culture around how you develop leaders. And culture, we're just thinking attitudes, beliefs, behaviours that we're exhibiting about this process. So if you invest in developing a culture that values leadership development, if you put resources into that, our efforts under God will have the best chance to stick. And as Christians, I think we already have a head start in shaping a culture that values leadership development. So we already value growing believers in maturity. We value raising up men and women to send into the harvest. And we already put real resources into this. So this culture that's seeing people through the lens of what might their next step be and putting resources into that, that's what grows leaders. So we already have a really good foundation. If you're thinking about how can I create a leadership development culture, just looking at extending on a culture that's probably already there. So the next idea is to know your layers. And I'm just going to give you an example of what that is. Who has seen this picture before? Yep, so people are pretty familiar with this. So what we've been talking about so far is really the serve pathway. How do we get people into serving in our church? When we're thinking about leadership development, we're thinking more about a pipeline. How do we get people to move up in the layers of leadership? So we're thinking about what types of tasks and what level of responsibility do our leaders need to have. And this isn't a godliness test. So we're not necessarily looking to put our most godly people. That's not the criteria. In fact, I'm sure many godly people work in roles in your church that aren't about leadership in this way. So we just think about the layers. The first foundation is leading yourself. So being a team member, you might be on a kids team or being in a team that makes serve chat calls. The next layer is being a team leader, where you're moving from leading self and others to leading a team. The next layer is being an area leader, where you move from leading a team to leading team leaders in a particular area. The next layer is being a department leader, where you serve by being responsible for a whole ministry. And then the next layer is being the senior leader, where you serve by leading the church as a whole. So you might have different terminology for that, but if you just think about the function at each layer. So the goal is not to have as many of these layers in your church as possible. What we're trying to do is have the fewest layers needed to lead our group of people well. So too many layers can actually make things more complicated than they need to be, and put too much resource on the leading and less on the actual doing. So a common pressure that people feel after seeing these layers is that they need to add these in. So we've had quite a few, say, heated discussions on our teams about how many layers we actually need to get the job done. If I ask you guys, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, we definitely first saw this, and then made these layers. And what happens when you add the layers is it gets complicated, and the problem with complicated and too many layers is people inevitably get hurt. So we had to deal with fallout in our church because of the lack of love and clarity that was given to the people within the layers. That was too many layers that we needed. So we've learnt through the process of pain that the least layers is good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Not excellent that you suffered in that moment, Ben. Sorry, I should just clarify that. Although I think we did disagree on role descriptions, so maybe some suffering for you is not that bad. So the next idea is that moving up means starting over. So what catches people off guard, and if you're familiar with this model, this might be familiar information to you, but moving up a layer isn't doing more of the same thing, it's a whole new job. So when we look at these layers, we see that we're going to need to develop leaders so that they have the knowledge, skills and abilities to do what's required at each layer. And the key idea here is that each layer, there's a change in how leaders use their time, the skills they need and what they love. So if you just look at the slide, you can see at the team leader level, the team leader values others doing a good job. They're probably going to spend their time prepping during the week and working on communication. And the skills they're going to need are to be able to brief meetings and give feedback, which is quite different to the skills you need as a team member, where you're going to value doing a good job. Your time's probably going to be just on the day, and your skills are going to be ministry specific. So if I give an example of Susan, obviously not her real name. So I had a conversation with Susan after a training night we were running, where she was weeping for quite a long time about how, after being in the role as a team leader for a year, she really didn't think that she could keep going in that role. And what had happened for Susan was she was just a gun welcomer. So she was the person, she just had the knack with people. You know, any new person, she could just strike up a conversation with them. It was very easy for her to do that. She was full of energy, so people loved to be around her. She seemed like she would be a natural for a leadership position. She was the sort of person who, I don't know about at your church, but when people come into our building, there's a sweet spot where you can make eye contact with them if they're a new person. If you go too early, it's that awkward, we're holding eye contact for a long time. But if you go too late, it's sort of like catching them by surprise. I don't know, does that happen for anyone else? I just think it's an art that some people have, knowing when to make eye contact. So Susan was really that person. But what was going on for Susan was, even though we tried to train and equip her to work at that team leader level, it just wasn't really her skill set. And so we're sort of in this tension then. What do we do? Do we keep trying to develop her into that layer, or do we say, actually, there's a much better way to deploy her than that? The next idea is that leadership skills that go anywhere. So as we see people moving up in layers, what we can see that they're building on is generic leadership skills. So we've got a difference between generic leadership skills, leading a meeting, being able to explain the how, thinking strategically in some cases, knowing how to run a team, knowing how to think about what the next step is for someone in development. We've got these sort of generic leadership skills, and then we've got ministry-specific skills. So if you've got a kids team, you need people in that kids team who know how to teach a lesson. But if you've got leadership in those kids spaces, you need people who have generic leadership skills. So our classic example for this is a man on our team called Sam Hilton. I don't know, does anyone know Sam at all? No. A few people. Sam, in our team, in our staff team, what happens is really jobs are up. You can move into different roles at any time. So we went through a process where we had decided to move to purposes, and Sam was on holidays when we decided that. And so obviously the team are discussing, we're going to do this new thing. It's going to be a big change for us. Who's going to take on what role? You're very serious and good at writing Bible studies. We're going to pick you for deep in the Word. That's the sort of discussion we were having. But then Sam came back from holidays, and he was given the job of the magnification role. The reach terminology has just escaped me from the moment. Remind me, what do we call that? Loving God. Okay, sorry about that. A momentary lapse. So Sam got the job of loving God. Now, the dilemma for Sam is he actually does not have a musical bone in his body. So he had to work out how is he going to lead this purpose area when he actually doesn't have any skills in this space. So what Sam relied on was his generic leadership skills. So even though he could not even play, the castanets, I think they did try and make him play the castanets, he actually did an excellent job in that role because he relied on his generic leadership skills. The next idea, the 70-20-10 rule, which is the idea that 10% of learning comes from information being passed on, 20% from watching others do a role and being coached in that role, and 70% of actually doing a job. So most of the way we learn is actually by doing things, which I think if we're thinking about growing our leaders, we really want to focus on supporting leaders as they learn on the job. So if you were to choose from any of those things, on-the-job training, coaching and providing a role model for someone to do a job, or giving information, we would always lean into the practical experience, but we want to make sure that we support people to do that. I don't think as Christians, we're not in the business of just throwing people in and expecting them to learn how to do things. We're in the business of loving people, by making sure that we give them the resources they need to do a job. So what that means really is the conversation that you have after this workshop actually matters more than any of the information that we're giving you now. So make sure you have those conversations. This information, I'm not going to estimate how much is going to stick. I was going to go for 5%, but I mean, my colleagues are excellent presenters, so I'm sure it's more than that. But really make sure that you're having those conversations, because that's where the learning will be. Okay. The next point is think about the yearly calendar. I know this feels like a really boring topic. I once was lucky enough to go to a presentation where a very earnest young man was doing a presentation on how to be organised as you run your ministry. I was quite excited because I'm not a very organised person, and I was like, this is going to solve all my problems. But I knew that things weren't going to go so well when he started off with spreadsheets as the way that was going to solve all my problems. So I'm feeling a bit of trepidation as I'm going to talk about the yearly calendar. So this is a bit of a glimpse into the calendar that we use in the serve area at HBC, and I think what you'll see is it's not very exciting. And it also has another feature which I think exists in the serve space, a lot of slightly unclear titles for things and acronyms. So maybe a litmus test for you if you're in the serve space. Just whip some more difficult to understand words in there and acronyms and you'll be on your way. You'll see down on the left-hand side, we actually spend some time thinking about how to plan across the year. That's to make sure that we're thinking about how much resource we're putting into each of these activities, and also to make sure that things don't drop off our sort of our timetable, because it's very easy, I think, in this space to let things slide, because it's sort of, there's not the heat that you need every day, so it can just drop to the bottom of the pile every time. So you see along the side we have our culture piece, where we're looking at how we're putting leadership development, serving into the life of the church, and we're thinking about promoting that. We've got mobilisation, which is really these recruitment and serve conversations. We've got development programs and sending. So if you just look into the development area, you'll see a couple of things that we do there. So we do leadership planning. So we make sure that we're meeting with our staff and just making sure we've got time to work out where we're up to with recruiting people, where we're leading to in terms of what we're going to need resources for leading in the next year. We have our developing leaders training. So you can see there in March we would have done trainers cohorts. So this is where we're really trying to invest in how we're training our leaders. So the cohorts are where we get our coaches together. We spend time with them, training them in coaching so that they can then take that skill back down to their leaders and train their leaders in coaching as well as coach them. We also have some consultancy that we do. And then if you look down below that, you'll see in our programs, there's a couple of things there that are the next point, which is around trainee programs. So you'll see we have Harvest, which is like an internal traineeship that we run. And we also have our MTS, which is our sending internship. So I'm sure many of you will have similar things of your own, some sort of formal training program that you're using. Katie's just going to talk a little bit about an internal program that they're starting to run.
Yeah, sure. Just really briefly, we noticed a gap in our leadership as well as one of our felt kind of needs as a church. So we've started this year a program that hopefully helps to equip and encourage our leaders. So it's people apply for it. It requires about a 1.5 hour a week commitment, so it's not a huge kind of internship. And it has 3 different components in the program. So one is that the cohort gather once a month for like an all-in training session or workshop, and we'll run them through some doctrinal things, some skills in leading meetings and skills in leading and things like that. The second component is a coaching, so they're all paired up with a coach so that whichever ministry area they're leading in, they can practically meet with that coach once a month and talk about what's going well, what goals am I setting, how's this working. We're using the Team Leaders Handbook for lots of those, which is a great kind of resource to use. And then the third part of it is we set them up with a discipleship partner that they meet with once a month as well. And that's just that acknowledgement that actually ministry is lived out in our whole lives and discipleship is lived out in our whole lives. We don't just want to grow in skills, but we want to be talking to someone about how we're living our lives, who we're opening the Bible with people. So that's kind of what we're trying this year to equip and encourage some of our leaders.
Excellent. So, last point, you'll be happy to know, or maybe not happy, it is getting close to dinner, is don't forget the individual. So we've been talking a lot about systems and processes, but people in reality aren't spreadsheet rows. And I think it's the rare person whose heart and mind's captured for leadership by a system. So in my experience, most people need the tap on the shoulder. We all need the quiet word, the person who says, oh, you've got a knack for winning people to an idea, or oh, you're the sort of person who can see how all parts of a team can work together, or a myriad of things. So everyone needs someone to give them the tap on the shoulder. So I am curious, who is here with someone who gave them the tap on the shoulder? Yep, so a few people. So I think this is just something we want to keep in mind. So I'm just going to ask you guys, this is a little bit unscripted, what do you remember about the person who gave you the tap on the shoulder and said, I think you should think about growing as a leader or developing as a leader?
I think my senior pastor did it to me when I was so not ready for it.
The phrase "did it to me" is interesting.
Sorry,
yeah,
did it to me. Well, no, because he definitely invited me into a role, and I think he just, I don't know, thought I could do it. And it's quite funny. At the time, I said no, but it's actually the role that I'm currently in now. So eventually, he got me. So sometimes it's more than one tap on the shoulder.
So it's a process. The tap on the shoulder isn't one moment in time. It's a tap on the shoulder. Do you want to?
Sure. If I'm perfectly honest, it took several taps on the shoulder for me to do it. But it was. I do remember just asking the question of why to my senior pastor when he asked, and I think his response was, "You, Katie, have a willingness to learn." That I thought actually I do have that, so I can grow in that. So that was a helpful way for me to kind of think about not just I had everything ready to go, but I could learn things.
I don't really have anything to add because I was just frothing to get into ministry. So I needed someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, slow down.
Okay. Okay, one last question. When they survey organisations about whether they think they're doing a good job of leadership development, just chat with the person next to you. What percentage of people, of organisations, would say they think they're doing a good job of developing their leaders? Just have a chat. Okay. Fish.
They're all going.
You'll be right.
Well, I get it.
No, dinner's not coming on till.
Okay.
If we wrap it up and go to questions, I'll explain that, and then we'll do questions, because I think that'd be good for them.
I think I would do some type of questions, definitely. And so I wouldn't necessarily take right through the quarter past. But
I'll just tell them there's people like
yeah, and we've got time. And basically, they've got to hang in here anyway, right? There's going to be 3 instructions.
Yeah, I'll just finish this question and then Sorry, I'll take that down. Okay, who thought 90%? 80%, 70%, 60%, 50%. Sorry, I just had to mentally work out how I was going there. 40%, 30%, 10%, 13%. So I just want to reassure you, this is a really complex task. We don't actually, it's really unsettling and difficult to do. And I would say Christians, we always underestimate our abilities and how much effort we're putting into things. So at 13% of people thinking they're doing well in this space, just take heart and give it a go. Just pick one of those things and think about what your next step is.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Emma. Appreciate that. Now, that does bring our time to a close on one hand, because we were meant to break out of here at 5:45, but I've got some good news and bad news. So the bad news is they've delayed dinner for a little bit, and they've just said, can you hang tight in your room where you are for a little bit? Okay, so you're stuck in here for a little bit. That's the bad news. The good news is we have time for questions. So we're going to throw it out. If there's anything, so if we remember the things that we looked at. So Katie began by talking to us about rosters and teams. Emily and I talked about recruitment. Emma finished with some leadership principles. So if there's anything that was raised tonight, if you want to ask a question, put your hand up, and then we'll have to send a runner out there. Rhett, you're the runner.
Thanks, guys. That was really helpful. What I've seemed to have picked up over the last couple of years I've been thinking about this is that teams are somewhat of a solution to a problem of a big church that's experiencing a lot of growth or doesn't have enough staff to do all the stuff that they want to do. What if I'm a sole pastor in a small church? Do I want to be thinking about teams and how should I implement them?
Yeah, good question. So how should we think about teams even if you're in a small church?
Maybe I could make one comment is what we know is that if we want good outcomes, teams and working in teams in any sort of organisation will give you a better outcome. So I don't think it's a question of size, even if you're small. In any type of group, you want to implement the idea of working in teams. Obviously, what that looks like in practice is going to be different depending on your size. Just to get more buy-in,
I mean, we're not a huge church either, and for several years we were just a staff team of 2. But I think one of the things that I found really helpful about implementing teams, even in that context, was that it gave people a real chance to step up and lead areas of ministry that I was just never getting to. I lead kids and membership, and so I'm often in the kids' spaces on a morning, which meant that membership was so unloved, like welcoming in particular was so unloved in our church. That when we started teams and I found someone who had a passion for that and was willing to lead that team in a volunteer capacity, she just kind of grew that ministry in a way that I couldn't. So if you've got the high capacity lay leaders to help out with that, I think in a small church context it can still work really well.
It's good. All right. Rhett's just having a chat.
Well, I'm just letting you know that, so dinner's not going to be served till 6, just to say, but because of the rain, it's essentially a rain delay. They're also staggering when they release each of the rooms so that we all don't, so that's what's going on, just to let you know. And then when you get your food, what you're being instructed to do is to get it quite efficiently and then come back to all the rooms, right? So that's just what's going on. So if you think going out there is not going to solve anything, so that's why you must just enjoy each other's company and continue to ask questions, right? So we're kind of here together for a bit longer.
Can you put that in the form of a question, please?
Yes, sorry, brother. Yeah, that's.
All right, Rhett, you need to run around. There's lots of hands.
Yeah, I
and
know.
we'll speed run the answers. That's all we'll do.
Hello. Thanks for that. You guys talked about layers of leadership and the dangers of having too many layers of leadership. What would be the kind of telltale signs that your ministry needs more layers of leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm happy to have a...
Okay, all right. He's happy. So sometimes you can run into these things that we just call pain points in leadership, and it can be when you are starting to feel overstretched. So there's too many people and too many direct reports. So if you're finding that you are a leader, a single leader of a team of 30 people, it might be good to actually start to implement another layer of leadership so that you've got 5 people looking after another 5 people. I don't know if that maths checks out, but...
Yeah, that's good. So I think, and in teams too, if you're not the person doing it, you'll begin to notice that they're no longer being as effective as they once were. And you can think through, if we could give them more leaders, they can actually care for more people and go on. So it's a bit of a vibe thing, I think, more than it is a structured thing. Are you happy with that? Yep, good. All right.
Ben, the people with role descriptions, they're feeling a bit nervous now because they want to know the exact...
Yeah. The answer is 7.